Hello, and welcome to Character Class. Today I would like to give you 5 more tips. 5 tips for storytelling Vampire the Masquerade. That's right, these tips are for storytellers and those who wish to delve into that deep, dark, murky pool from whence you will never return. So, 5 tips for Vampire the Masquerade. And because I've already done tips for playing it, but not for storytelling it. So, tip number 5 for storytelling Vampire the Masquerade. Now, being the world of darkness, which is supposed to be a lot like our world, but slightly darker, slightly different, more grimy, more crime, etc., etc. Most people usually will put that particular their campaign that they're running in their own city. Not all people, but a lot of people will. But regardless of whether you do that or not, my number 5 tip is to know the city. Know the city that you're putting it in. Know the area if it's not a city. If it's a rural town, an area, know it. Do your research. Look things up. If it is the city that you're in, spend some time, walk around, check things out, see what's where and whatnot. You can get ideas for locations that you can put in your city. But it's always a good idea to know. Uh, know the city, know the feel of the neighborhoods, because then you can extrapolate from there and make a more fleshed out, more realistic, darker, grimier version of it. And that's really all that this tip is to make sure you know what you're doing with your city. Uh, know what you're going to be putting in it, know if there's any special areas, uh, what supernaturals are kicking around in there, and so on. Which segues into my number 4 tip, is to know the clans and the supernatural characters that you want to have. You don't have to know them all. Absolutely not. But you do have to know the ones you're putting into it. So when you're doing vampire and whatnot, if you're going to have a Camarilla run city, then you've got the 7 Camarilla clans at least. Maybe not all of them. Maybe maybe the prince has a grudge against a certain clan and is like, nope, that clan is not allowed here. Uh, don't know. It's up to you as the storyteller how you want to lay that out. But you want to know enough about the clans that you're going to be including in here. If any of the independents are going to be in there, if any of the Sabbat are lurking around, you want to know enough about those clans and their powers and whatnot to be able to run them as characters. Um, but the same also goes for the other supernaturals, the werewolves, the mages, the wraiths, the changelings, any hunters that may be in there and whatnot. You want to know those supernaturals, the ones you're planning to include. Now, maybe you're not going to include any for the first few sessions when you're playing, so you don't need to worry about it for those sessions, but it's something to read up on, something you want to include. So always keep an eye on what you're planning to put in your game and do your research on that. Um, I say do your research a lot for many of the tips, but it is absolutely vital that you know what you're talking about when you're playing it. As always, you don't have to know everything, but it's good to know a fair bit. It's good to be familiar with the material. Now, my number three tip are NPCs. Now, there's going to be a lot of non-player characters, quite possibly, in your campaign, depending on what you're running. Um, so you're going to have basically every character of note that is, and every character that your players interact with that isn't them, you will be controlling. They will be your NPCs. Uh, but there will be things like the prince, the primogen, the seneschal, the sheriff, um, as well as other potent members of the clans and the supernaturals that the head of the supernaturals that are kicking around, if there is any. It all depends on what you want to throw in. but you should take the time ahead of time. I find this has helped me out greatly, but take the time ahead of time and print out some sheets for the ones that you're planning on including, these NPCs of note, and fill in the dots for them. How powerful they are, what their generation is, what abilities they have. That way, you have a handy stack of sheets, reference, that you can look at a moment's notice, um, when you're in game. If there's a combat encounter with one of them, or if there is some kind of a uh, social dynamic where one of them would use one of their powers, you have the sheets there. You know what can be rolled. It's good to have that prepared ahead of time. Take the time, put the effort in to get that done because it will help you out in the long run. And keep a baby name book as well. I mentioned that in one of my reference books for storytellers. Uh, a baby name book will be vital when you're making a stack of NPCs. My first vampire game that I ran for my current group that I'm playing with, I basically populated like 200 vampires in my city, and that baby name book saved my life because I'm like, I need a name. Why am I only thinking of like A names? So you get the baby book out, flip through it, find a name, slap it on. Easy do. But you want to get your NPCs done. Number two, my second tip, pay attention to the player characters. Not just the players, but pay attention to them too, but the player characters. Pay attention to what they do, what their flaws are, um, who their contacts are, their allies, their friends and family that's in their history. Uh, you should always get them to write a history too, in my opinion. But pay attention to the PCs and how they act towards other NPCs. Uh, keep little notes for when they brush off or snub an NPC because then that character won't like them. Uh, it's one of those things. If you pay attention to that and you keep an eye on things, there can be so many ideas for things to throw at the characters just out of the blue, uh, sessions down the road after they've forgotten that they snubbed this, kind of high-ranking Toreador, and then all of a sudden the Toreador calls in a favor, and they've got trouble now. There's things that you can do with that, but you need to pay attention to the player characters and what they're doing. Their flaws are another big thing. Pay attention to those and keep an eye on them because they can often be used to throw monkey wrenches in the player's plans and cause interesting tension and such. So do that. And my number one tip for storytelling Vampire the Masquerade is that you need to be aware that Vampire the Masquerade is a very political and social game, more so than some of the others. Werewolf tends to be fairly combat heavy. Mage tends to be a nice blend of politics, social, and combat. Um, Changeling tends to be extremely social and political, as well as combat heavy, all at the same time. It's a very weird one. Wraith is one of those ones where combat isn't exactly a thing, but it's a very personal and social game. Um, and Hunter the Reckoning is one of the ones that are pretty combat heavy as well. But uh, that's just the whole antagonistic nature of the Hunter in general. But Vampire especially is quite political and social. There's a lot of social interaction between vampires because while they're solitary creatures, they crave society and they band together because safety in numbers. But they're also very competitive, very backstabbing, and there's a lot of politics involved in how the different clans interact, how the different vampires within a clan interact. and so on and so forth. And those are elements that you need to make sure uh, that your players understand, because you don't want to have a player start to play expecting to be all combat net heavy and whatnot. If you want to run a combat heavy vampire game, that's up to you. But you don't want somebody coming in expecting your game to be lots of combat and whatnot when it's mostly politics and talking and social and networking and so on. And vice versa, you don't want to have somebody coming into your combat heavy game with a social character because they're probably going to die real quick. You gotta pay attention to that sort of thing and kind of tailor make your game to your players. But Vampire in particular, as I said, is a very political social game in terms of how things are designed and how the vampire society is designed. And to kind of take it away from that is to take away from the game itself, I find, in my opinion. But those are my 5 tips for storytelling Vampire the Masquerade. I'll be throwing out some tips for storytelling uh, the other systems as well. Uh, Thank you all so much for watching. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please give that like button a tap, give that subscribe button a tap, and ring the bell if you haven't already, so you can be kept apprised of when I do new videos. Usually try and put at least one video out a week, if not more, and I've been doing pretty good on the more. Uh, Aiming for the 5 videos a week now, but no promises on the 5, but I will always have at least one video out a week. Um, and throw a comment in the comment section. What do you think about storytelling, Vampire the Masquerade? What are your tips and tricks on how to do that? Toss the comment in the comment section. I'd love to get a discussion going with some people. And until next time, my friends, you all take care, keep rolling, and I'll see you around.